Revealed, security guard studying by flashlight. This incredible discovery transformed both lives forever. Casey paced the empty library, shadows stretching long across the rows of bookshelves as he moved, the echo of his footsteps reverberating through the silence. The moonlight filtered in through the tall windows, illuminating a world he desperately wanted to escape. In this small Midwestern town, his life felt like a hamster wheel, round and round, yet never moving forward. Each night was the same, patrolling dark hallways, scrutinizing silent classrooms, and then retreating to his cramped apartment, where dreams battled against exhaustion and despair. Yet, tonight was different. The oppressive stillness seemed to beckon him to dive deeper into knowledge. It was as if the universe whispered of possibilities. He came across an unassuming notebook nestled in the dusty embrace of a shelf. Curious, he pulled it out, revealing pages adorned with complex mathematical equations that sent shivers down his spine. This wasn't just any notebook. It belonged to a once revered professor whose ambitions had been buried under a train wreck of scandal and despair, a reminder of how fragile dreams could be. As Casey flipped through the pages, a thrill surged through him, juxtaposed against his own burgeoning ambitions. The professor had chased the stars, just as Casey wanted to, yet fate had thrust them into vastly different lives. Could he reclaim this forgotten legacy? Would he dare to intertwine his journey with the echoes of a shattered dream? But just as excitement surged through him, it tangled with the anxiety that gripped his heart. How could he pursue this opportunity, knowing it could be a distraction from what was right in front of him? Each equation pulled him deeper into a world where he was most alive yet haunted by the specter of his estranged father, a man whose absence felt suffocating. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as Casey immersed himself in those equations, memories of his father stormed back, the quiet phone calls that never happened, the hollow apartment echoing with unspoken words. Suddenly, his father re-entered his life, dragging with him a host of painful secrets that shattered the fragile peace he had built. As he learned of their shared lineage of broken ambitions, he was torn. Was he destined to repeat the same pattern? Would diving into the professor's forgotten work drive him further from reconciliation? His heart raced with each passing minute. Ambition battled guilt as Casey questioned his every motivation. Was he just a security guard chasing borrowed dreams, or could he forge a path illuminated by his own understanding? He weighed the weight of family against the freedom of aspiration, each equation on the pages before him begging him to make a choice. All he had to do was reconcile the longing for independence with the need to mend his fractured family ties. So it came down to this, a moment thick with tension, where past and future collided. Every delay only heightened the pressure, forcing Casey to confront truths he had suppressed too long. As the hours slipped by, a decision loomed. Could he honor the legacy of a failed dream while piecing together his family's fragmented history? The stakes felt insurmountable, and time was running out. The decision sat heavy on his shoulders, a ticking clock racing toward a point of no return. Casey's mind whirled as he stood in the library's dim light, clutching the notebook that had ignited a spark of ambition in an otherwise mundane existence. The complex equations flared like distant stars, beckoning him to explore truths that lay beyond his current reality. Yet, amidst that promise of enlightenment, guilt clawed at the edges of his consciousness. Each page felt like an unrelenting reminder of the risks he was contemplating, the weight of the past pressing against his resolve. Could he juggle the commitment to his estranged father with the pursuit of brilliance beckoning from the notebook? Each formula seemed to mock his uncertainty, raising questions that felt like barbs in his heart. Maybe crawling into forgotten equations would provide an escape route, but would it also leave him stranded amidst the wreckage of unexamined relationships? With a shaky breath, Casey turned his focus back to the present. He opted against spending another night rolling thoughts over until the sun broke. He needed clarity, a plan. As the echo of his footsteps faded into the cold air surrounding him, he made a decision. He de-studied the notebook, allowing the professor's legacy to blend with his quest for purpose while promising to confront his father's shadow. But how would he approach the man who had left a void in his life? A mixture of excitement and dread bubbled within him. He saw the potential for growth in asking questions and sharing truths, even if they were painful. Taking action meant stepping into a new version of himself, one that might finally begin to reconcile personal ambition with familial duty to shape a narrative that wasn't authored solely by abandonment. The following days transformed into a blur of equations and memories, ebbing and flowing as he immersed himself in the professor's work. Each formula was a stepping stone. They articulated not just abstract ideas but pathways into understanding and coherence. Late-night study sessions turned into a sanctuary, a haven where thoughts crystallized, away from judgment and emotional baggage. But then, one evening, he stumbled upon a particularly difficult theorem. It gnawed at him, as if it were a reflection of his struggles, an insurmountable barrier between logic and irrational expectations. His initial impulses were to shove the notebook aside. Walking away seemed like the easier path. Yet, with every lapse in concentration, the realization hit him: difficulties were necessary for growth. The same principle applied to his relationship with his father. Could he confront the theorem head-on as he needed to face the man who had walked out on him? An epiphany struck him: tackling complexities required persistence, not avoidance. He resolved that although confronting his father might feel more daunting than any mathematical proof, it was essential for his personal development. Fueled by newfound determination, he penned a letter to his father. Each line was like solving for X. He meticulously articulated the emotions that had festered for years. The provisional comfort of the library faded as he poured his heart onto the page, unearthing truths he had kept buried for as long as he could remember. By the time he sealed that envelope, the weight atop his shoulders had begun to lift. But just as Casey felt the first wisps of liberation, doubt crashed over him once more. Would this letter truly lead to a connection, or was he setting himself up for another heartbreak? As he stared at the envelope, everything felt at once uncertain and exhilarating. The clock was ticking toward a confrontation not only with his father but with his own identity. Could he embrace this new phase, where ambition refused to bow to past failures? The question now loomed larger: what would he do once the letter fell through the mailbox slot? An unexpected surge of dread washed over him as he anticipated his father's response, and if there would even be one at all. Casey paced his small apartment, the letter resting heavily in his pocket as though its physical weight mirrored the emotional burden he carried. The walls felt closer than they had before, filled with memories he could neither escape nor confront directly. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown, not only to the moment he would drop the letter in the mailbox but also to the inevitable reckoning that awaited him, a confrontation with the past. He wished he could leap into the formulas that danced in his mind, immersing himself entirely in their complexities. Hadn't the notebook shown him that there was elegance in solving problems, a path that led to clarity and mastery? If only human relationships could be approached with the same rigor, dissected and solved, transforming the entangled mess of emotions into something manageable. With each passing day, however, time became a cruel reminder of his indecision. What if he never sent the letter? What if he was forever trapped in a cycle of wondering and wishing? Recalling theorems that eluded him, he realized his hesitation was a theorem of its own, one defined by fear of failure rather than the thrill of discovery. As he dove into his studies, he found solace in the equations, yet behind each calculated symbol, he felt a pulsating misalignment within himself, tight and uncomfortable. The structure he sought in mathematics contrasted starkly with the chaotic remnants of his relationship with his father. Each day spent solving the unknown only served to emphasize the unsolved puzzle of his family ties. Determined to reframe his reality, Casey took a deep breath and sought the source of his paralysis. Deep-seated anger and disappointment were surfacing, feelings he had eagerly suppressed for years. He realized that this letter was more than just a request for connection, it was a declaration of his own existence, a testament to the man he had become in light of being abandoned. Writing would reclaim his narrative. Instead of seeking validation from his estranged father, perhaps he could find strength in his own voice. He took a step back from the desk and situated himself across from a mirror. Could he face himself without the shadows of his past? Serenity filled the space as he closed his eyes, recalling moments from his childhood, an exuberant boy solving puzzles, seeking approval that was never fully given. Each fragmented memory hinted at resilience, a fierce determination that had survived years of neglect. Perhaps in understanding that boy, he could glean insight into who he was now. At this crossroads, with renewed focus, he turned back to the notebook, allowing himself to dive deep into theories and abstract concepts, channeling the exhilaration of intellectual pursuit. In doing so, he felt sparks of understanding ignite within him. He realized that confronting the pain of his past did not mean succumbing to it. Instead, it was a matter of embracing the lessons it had to offer. That night, after a particularly frustrating session attempting to solve a new theorem, a moment of clarity struck him. He was not merely a sum of his experiences, he had the power to redefine their significance. What if he could use the anguish of his family history as a catalyst? The very struggles that pinned him down could propel him forward. Casey resolved to send the letter the following day, but it wasn't just about reaching out to his father anymore. It was also about reaching into his identity and purpose. He envisioned himself bravely pushing that envelope through the mailbox slot, a symbolic act of agency, and yet, as he sat at the wooden table, that beautiful yet painful balance between excitement and dread simmered. Days passed with the envelope getting heavier in his pocket, and then an unexpected thought struck him. What if he got a response from his father that would turn everything upside down, making him question all the growth he had worked so hard to achieve? Casey's pulse quickened. What would he do if the response wasn't what he hoped for? The mere possibility stirred a pit in his stomach, igniting another layer of the carefully woven tension within him. The moment of truth was drawing closer, leaving him grasping for clarity in the fog that enveloped his future. He was about to discover whether confronting one's past would pave the way for greater understanding or if it would unravel the very foundation he had been trying to build. Would he be ready to face the truth of his father, and thus the truth of himself? A weight lifted slightly from Casey's chest with each day that passed, but the letter remained a fixture in his pocket, a constant point of tension. As the moment drew near, he felt a strange dichotomy of emotions. Anticipation and fear danced within him like shadows, at times collapsing each into the other, blurring the lines of what he thought he desired. The evening before he planned to send the letter, he forced himself to study a particularly challenging theorem. Yet, despite the equations that usually drew him in like a magnet, his thoughts wandered incessantly back to the unopened letter and what awaited him beyond that mailbox slot. That night, as the sun slipped below the horizon, leaving only the dim glow of a desk lamp, Casey began to scribble in his notebook, a crucible for his swirling thoughts. He wrote about his father, the absence that loomed larger than life, the moments of childhood spent in silence, a young boy chasing after shadows, hoping to catch a glimpse of a man who wasn't there. Each stroke of the pen allowed him to confront those buried emotions in a way he had never before envisioned. For every ounce of hurt, there was also resilience fueling his perspective. Why had he waited this long? The realization dawned that it was not just the fear of rejection but the suffocating grip of expectation. He expected himself to feel certain, to know what he was prepared to hear. But this was a leap into the unknown, and in that turbulent space lay a reality he had yet to entertain, the possibility of forgiveness, for both his father and himself. As midnight approached, Casey slipped the completed letter from his pocket and laid it on the desk. Could he truly be ready to confront that entwined history? If he flipped the pages of his life, he'd discover moments he wished to erase yet simultaneously cherished. He felt like a student revising for a final examination, so much riding on a single decision made in that small room. In an uncharacteristic surge of impulse, he grabbed the letter, standing up with a sudden resolve. His heart thumped loudly in the silence of the empty apartment as he articulated the significance of this moment. He pictured himself at the mailbox, the surrounding night enveloping him, casting a layer of uncertainty on the path forward. What if his father's response unraveled him? Did he truly have the strength to withstand words that could upend everything he believed he had learned? Yet within this apprehension grew a steely determination. Wasn't facing potential pain better than the agonizing torment of unanswered questions? The decision solidified in him as he stepped toward the door, but just as he was about to twist the knob, a raindrop tapped against the window, a messenger of change. Should he let this small yet powerful force deter him? In a flash, Casey felt that he was no longer a boy waiting to be found. He was an adult, authoring his own narrative, ready to take a chance. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself, making a mental note to send the letter. It was time to embrace the shadows, the intricacies of an estranged relationship. Uncertain as the future loomed, Casey felt redefined by the power of his choice. As he settled back into his resolve, he prepared his mind to accept whatever consequences lay ahead. In that quiet moment, emerging clarity washed over him. He could no longer afford to stay silent, trapped in the contours of fear. The moment had come to claim his truth. But in doing so, he couldn't help but wonder what if that truth was far more daunting than he had envisioned. The underlying question bubbled beneath the surface like an ignited fuse, urging him not only to confront his father but to also prepare for a revelation that could reshape everything he believed about himself. What awaited him beyond that envelope could change the very fabric of his identity. And with that thought hovering ominously in the air, Casey stood poised on the precipice of his past, ready to leap into the unknown, yet fearful of the depths he might uncover. Casey awoke the next morning with the weight of the letter heavy in his thoughts, its presence more palpable than ever. He had planned to send it out first thing, a ritual meant to clear the air and open the door to healing. Yet, as he lay in bed, uncertainty gnawed at him. Had he caught the remnant embers of courage only to watch them flicker out? When he finally rose and dressed, the mundane routine felt foreign, tainted by the import of his impending choice. Breakfast tasted bland as he sat at the table, an anchor of normalcy clashing with the storm brewing within him. He glanced at the clock, the hands mercilessly ticking down as if mocking his hesitation. With a primal need for some semblance of control, he turned to his studies. Diving into the world of equations that were once his refuge, he strategized brilliantly on paper but found it impossible to focus. Theorems became blurred lines, symbols dancing away into a fog as thoughts of his father invaded every mental corner. Was it too late to change his mind? The question lingered in his mind, threatening the work he had put into unraveling not just the equation on the page but the complexities of his relationship with his father. Suddenly, mathematics seemed too simplistic, too precise compared to the chaos of familial bonds. He put his pencil down, frustration bubbling up, almost daring him to abandon his academic pursuits entirely. Before long, he found himself pacing the room. The movement steadied him, grounding him in the present moment, yet his heart raced. What would his father say? What if he didn't acknowledge the pain Casey had lived with all these years? The multitude of responses raced through Casey's mind: acceptance, denial, anger, or perhaps a painful silence. Each scenario played like a film, and with each new possibility, his resolve wavered. Suddenly, it clicked: this wasn't solely about the letter or his father, it was about Casey's evolution. He was no longer that boy chasing shadows, paralyzed by abandonment. No, he had grown into a man, capable of navigating the turbulent seas of existence. It was more than a letter, it was a declaration of his own growth and his right to voice his hurt. With a decisive swing of his arm, Casey faced his desk, the letter still resting there, waiting for him to make up his mind. It felt deceptively small but held the potential to shatter years of silence. Resolved to confront his past and claim a future undefined by old scars, he picked it up, rolling the edges between his fingers as if feeling the energy contained within. The world outside and the calming rhythm of raindrops against his window offered a contrasting backdrop to his internal chaos. Casey knew he was on the brink, it was now or never. He moved to the door, the letter flapping gently in his grip. Was he driven by fear or something greater? He couldn't be sure. But beneath the layers of anxiety, there was a pulse of determination. With his heart beating in tandem with his thoughts, he flung the door open and stepped into the rain. The weather mirrored his feelings, chaotic and cleansing, as he walked toward the mailbox. Each step felt significant, a layering of courage over doubt, a testament to how far he had come. But even as he embraced this moment, a chilling thought struck him: what if the response was not the solution he sought but merely a new set of challenges? With the mailbox in sight, he paused. An epiphany washed over him. Change was not in the acknowledgement of his father's response but in his willingness to accept himself fully, regardless of the outcome. This moment could either empower him or plunge him into depths he could not anticipate. In that heartbeat of time where he stood suspended between action and contemplation, Casey's hand trembled just above the slot in the mailbox. The weight of his choice loomed larger than the letter itself, and he realized that this was only the first step in a larger journey. The truth he sought to uncover would not only reveal his father but also illuminate hidden aspects of himself that had long lain dormant. As he slipped the letter into the box, he found himself enveloped by an unexpected pulse of hope mingled with fear. The rain continued to fall as he walked away. Was he ready for whatever lay beyond this release? Perhaps this was merely the beginning. An array of questions awaited him still, shadows waiting to be acknowledged. With each heartbeat echoing in the quiet aftermath, Casey wondered, would he discover more than just his father's response on this path towards self-actualization? As Casey walked away from the mailbox, the rain fell heavier, drenching him in a cold reminder of the weight he had just released. The clash between relief and anxiety surged within him, igniting a surge of adrenaline that left him both breathless and exhilarated. As much as he wanted to retreat into the comfort of denial, he could feel the universe shifting beneath his feet, reconfiguring the very essence of his reality. Thoughts spiraled. What had he unlocked by sending that letter? Empowerment or chaos? The rain was a baptism of sorts, washing away remnants of doubt but also taunting him with uncertainties he had yet to face. Every step became a push against the sticky threads of the past that still clung to him, threatening to pull him backward at the slightest hint of hesitation. Once inside, he peeled off his wet clothes and sat on the edge of his bed, wrapped in a towel. The room felt both claustrophobic and liberating, a paradox that mirrored his thoughts. He glanced at the walls adorned with academic accolades and equations, reminders of who he had been. It was not enough anymore. He needed more than validations that came from formulas. He needed evolution. In that stillness, he allowed the events of the past few days to replay like a movie. Sending the letter was a pivotal scene, yes, but it was only one moment in a much larger script. He considered how he had relied upon mathematics as a coping mechanism, escaping into numbers when emotional turmoil was too much to bear. But now, faced with the rawness of his feelings, he realized those equations were just a facade, a way to mask the chaos that lived beneath. Fueled by discomfort, he bolted to his desk and began flipping through textbooks, searching for a distraction that wouldn't evaporate easily. Mixing ink with uncertainty, he wrote furiously, pouring his thoughts onto paper. Ruminations turned into questions. How many times had he sought solace in figures, while failing to reckon with his emotional self? What did it mean to balance vulnerability with ambition? As he processed these questions, a deeper truth emerged. Intellectual confidence had shielded him for years, but now he must learn to confront his feelings with similar fervor. He realized that merely sending the letter did not equate to growth. It was the beginning of an ongoing process. He closed his eyes, envisioning the moments that lay ahead. He would need to be prepared for the response, prepared to dig deeper into the well of emotions he had long ignored. Would his father's words hold healing, or would they lead to further discord? What if, in confronting his father, he was also forced to confront the man he had become and all the layers of resentment and pain he had meticulously crafted? With resolve, Casey returned to his desk and began sketching a rough blueprint of what the next steps might look like. First, he'd need to engage in conversations with those who filled the gaps in his support system. No longer would he hide from vulnerability. He had to surround himself with individuals who could help him navigate the uncharted waters of this confrontation. Then came the whirlwind of realization. Engagement had to be reciprocal. In learning to be open, he must also learn the art of listening. To connect. This could be both a powerful and terrifying journey, one that required a dance between sharing his truth and being receptive to others. Each decision felt heavier than the last, but a flicker of determination within him sparked a new. As the rain softened its assault outside, Casey leaned back in his chair, a mixture of fear and hope intertwining like double helix strands. His next challenge would reveal itself soon enough. What awaited him in those conversations? He understood that true growth came with a price, and he was prepared to pay it. The soft chime of his phone broke the silence, pulling him from his contemplative state. A message appeared in notification from his inbox. Was it his father responding already? The anticipation seized him, a mixture of dread and excitement swirling in his chest. As he reached for the phone, a new thought crashed over him with seismic force. Would this message spur his evolution forward, or push him back into the shadows he had just begun to escape? With one deep breath, he clicked open the message, steeling himself for whatever would come next. Casey exhaled sharply as he stared at the screen, his heart racing in synchronization with the words that unfolded before him. It was his father's response. Brief, clipped, and void of any emotional tapestry, the message read, "Received your letter. Could meet. Let me know when." In that moment, the gravity of his commitment pressed down on him like an anchor, pulling him into the depths of myriad unresolved emotions. This was it. His father was willing to engage, to confront the abyss that existed between them, but in exchange, Casey realized he had to step into the void himself. He rubbed his temples, a caffeinated whirl of thoughts colliding. How do you write back to a figure who had been both mentor and specter in your life? A mixture of apprehension and the clarity of necessity propelled him into action. This was not just a reply, it was a potential catalyst for a transformation he had conceived but could not fully grasp yet. Instead of texting promptly, he sat back, allowing the cool air of the room to soothe his rising tension. The looming conversation felt like a duel. Would he emerge victorious, or would he be laid bare, exposed to the unforgiving brightness of truths he had shielded himself from? With shaking fingers, he opened a new draft. Before he typed a single word, he paused to reflect on who he was now, crafted by his journey so far. This Casey was no longer the boy seeking validation through equations or solitude. He had stepped into a new dimension where feelings had weight and silence could echo like a thunderclap. He was preparing for an encounter where vulnerability became strength, that understanding ignited something profound within him. Why had he allowed his father's disapproval to dictate his self-worth for so long? He'd been an uncanny reflection of regret, shackled by inherited expectations. This was his chance to reshape that narrative. Even as the specter of his father loomed large next to the message window, his pile of sketches lay like a roadmap to growth. Conversations awaited him, and he now had a tool: his newly penned letter. He imagined a different reality where he would confront his father, but even more crucially, where he could confront himself. What if he used this opportunity not only to speak but to listen, and to uncover what had kept them apart? With renewed determination, Casey began typing. "I received your message." The words flowed with each keystroke, as he poured himself into those lines, grateful for the digital platform that allowed an emotional canvas to manifest. After he clicked send, the silence that followed felt different. It wasn't filled with dread, it pulsed with potential. He'd reached a tipping point, one where the depths of conversation could either lead to closure or open wounds that would need sewing. He knew this wasn't merely about his father, it was about the legacy of their relationship, the burdens he had carried for too long. But as the minutes ticked by slowly, that familiar trepidation began to creep back in. What if this meeting dredged up more turmoil than resolve? Questions fluttered through his mind like moths drawn to the flame. Could he navigate this without unraveling? Would he find the courage to articulate the pain that had swirled in the shadows for years, or would he be reduced to the boy who only sought his father's approval? As he contemplated, his phone buzzed again. Another message flickered to life, and Casey's breath caught in his throat. Was it a reply? Or something altogether different, another obstacle to overcome on this tumultuous path? He opened it, eyes scanning for clarity, realizing that every interaction, every exchange, was not just an engagement with another person, it was a confrontation with himself. It was a reaffirmation of growth, an invitation to select presence over avoidance. And then the words flashed up: "Let us meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. The reality of this encounter loomed large, dizzying. Casey felt both dread and exhilaration intertwine, a precarious balance as he recognized that this moment could very well define him. The stage was set, the next chapter to unfold deep within the nexus of confrontation and evolution. As he prepared himself for what would happen next, one thought persisted: could he transform this impending reckoning into an empowering moment, or would he once again retreat into the shadows? Only time would tell, and he found himself eager yet hesitant to discover what awaited him. Standing in his living room, Casey's mind whirled with the ramifications of his father's message. Tomorrow. The weight of the single word felt like a leaden shroud draped over him. He picked at his sketchbook, flipping through pages, each lined with ideas, emotions, and unanswered questions that fought for his attention. What was it about their relationship that bred so much confusion? He couldn't unravel the pattern that had governed his childhood, where disapproval loomed larger than praise. In the corners of his mind, he revisited memories like a movie reel, his father's sharp tongue dishing out critique, the moments when praise could fit into a fleeting glance or a curt nod. Every recollection carried the echoes of a boy striving for acceptance. This was the moment to break free from it all. Yet the tremors of anxiety still coursed through him. Casey set the sketchbook aside, instinctively reaching for a notepad instead. Words began to take shape, an intention crafted from resolve. He needed to articulate his hopes for tomorrow's meeting, not just the words he wanted to say but the emotions he wished to convey. What did he truly want from his father? Courage bubbled up within him as Casey penned down his thoughts. He wrote of his desire for understanding, for connection. He wanted to traverse the chasm of their history, not to point fingers or place blame but to extend an olive branch in hopes of mutual healing. Between the lines, he identified a subtle truth: this endeavor was as much about his father's acceptance as it was about Casey accepting himself. Every stroke of the pen felt like emancipation from an identity forged in endless doubt. He wasn't a boy anymore, he was a man, grown from the soil of that very struggle. The thought steadied his breath, thickening his resolve. He put the notepad down and glanced at the clock. It was getting late, but sleep was elusive. Instead, he slipped into a meditative state, envisioning the meeting with his father. What if he approached it not as a son seeking validation, but as an individual demanding sincerity and respect? Natasha's voice echoed in his ear: "You have to be ready to confront not just him, but your own expectations of yourself." With this fresh perspective, Casey paced the room, contemplating how he would handle the inevitable spirals of confrontation. There were unanswered questions, deep-rooted assumptions, and recalibrated boundaries that needed to be addressed. As thoughts crystallized into a coherent plan, Casey recognized another layer within him. The artist he had been nurturing through coursework and late-night sketches was ready to emerge, not just in terms of creativity but in expressing his emotions. Art had always been a refuge, a means of translating complex feelings. Perhaps he could use this ability to navigate his conversation with his father, subtly channeling his emotions through layers of meaning. An idea struck him, luminous and inviting. What if he brought along one of his sketches, a visual representation of their entangled history? It could serve as a bridge, a conversation starter that illuminated the complexities of their relationship in a tangible form. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a chance to collaborate on understanding. With the decision solidified in his mind, Casey felt a spark of excitement. This was his opportunity to articulate the flood of emotions that had long been trapped inside. As he prepared to retreat to bed, thoughts of colors and shapes intertwined with dialogues and emotions in an unusual symbiosis. The meeting could redefine not just his connection with his father, but also his own sense of identity. But as the thoughts settled into place, Casey realized there was still a nagging uncertainty. Would translating the emotional weight of their history into art resonate with his father? Would he see it as an attempt to forge a path forward or a childish gesture meant for approval? The night wore on, a blur of excitement and dread, and just before surrendering to sleep, he felt the familiar pulse of his heartbeat. Against the quietude. Tomorrow was not just about their exchange, it was about discovering what they could construct together from their fragmented pasts. Yet, beneath that hope lingered a warning. What if his father rejected this approach outright? What if the very act of sharing his art elicited contempt rather than understanding? As Casey's eyelids grew heavy, those unanswered questions lingered, an echo of anxiety that vied for his attention. He drifted off to sleep, unaware of how these pressing uncertainties would shape the arduous dialogue to come. Empowered by a newfound clarity but haunted by doubt, a pivotal confrontation lay ahead. What awaited him in the waking hours was a canvas of potential, but the brush of acceptance remained untested. As dawn approached, Casey's anticipation morphed into a palpable sense of urgency. Would he emerge as a newfound architect of their relationship, unveiling layers long shrouded in denial? Or would he find himself ensnared in a cycle of rejection yet again? The answer, he realized, would only emerge when the discussion began, when both choices and truths collided, setting the stage for a revelation that could irrevocably alter their destinies. As morning light filtered through the curtains, its warmth nudged Casey from sleep. With a jolt, he remembered the weight of the day ahead. As he groggily composed himself, doubts and fears crept back in. Would today mark the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship, or would it reinforce the scars of the past? Determined to embrace the opportunity, he kept the sketch of their shared history close, its edges slightly rumpled from a restless night. As he prepared for the day, he took a moment to study it. The lines he had drawn captured emotions tangled in time: fear, yearning, bitterness, all manifested in jagged strokes. This represented not just his relationship with his father, but his own evolution. In the shower, water cascaded over him like a baptism, washing away the remnants of anxiety. Still damp, he returned to mirror reflection and began rehearsing his words, the underlying hope palpable. With each iteration of his message to his father, he felt his resolve harden. "I am not here to seek your approval. I want to be seen." The clock ticked ominously in the background as he chose his outfit. Casual yet poised, he wanted to project a blend of confidence and vulnerability. Mid-adjusting his collar, he caught sight of the sketch again. It struck him this wasn't merely a dialogue, it was an embodiment of his growth. With his heart pounding, Casey arrived at the cafe where they agreed to meet. It buzzed with morning chatter, yet all he sensed was a thick silence. Every moment felt like an eternity. He settled into a corner booth, his sketch strategically positioned next to a cup of coffee, an invitation waiting to be accepted. Minutes crawled by, each tick of the clock echoing in his mind. When his father finally arrived, he carried his usual sharp demeanor like armor. Casey watched as his father's eyes scanned the room, and dread twisted in his stomach. Would he even notice the sketch? Casey, his father greeted, without warmth. "Dad," Casey answered, forcing a smile. They both took their seats, and an uncomfortable pause enveloped them. With courage bolstering his voice, Casey cleared his throat. "I have something I want to share with you." He slid the sketch forward, taking a deep breath before looking into his father's eyes, searching for a flicker of interest. His father's brow furrowed, skepticism plain on his face. "What's this?" With a steady voice, Casey began to explain, piecing together the narrative of his artwork. He talked about the emotions embedded within every brushstroke, tracing their history, the frustration, longing, and misunderstood affection that had colored their relationship. Would his father even attempt to understand the layers beneath it all? For a moment, he saw his father falter, a glimpse of vulnerability breaking through his hardened exterior. But just as quickly, that flicker extinguished. "I don't think this is the time for art," he snapped, lips pulling into a tight line. The denial bit deep, but Casey refused to let despair freeze him. With newfound resolve, he pressed on, chanting a silent mantra of self-acceptance. "It's not just about the art. It's about the journey, what we've both been through. I need you to see me, to see us as something worth salvaging." The words hung in the air, waiting for a response that if left unspoken would stoke a raging fire of frustration. His father's walls began to creep back up, but Casey sensed a crack fissuring through the facade. "Do you really think that's how it works? You just want me to see you, but you never consider," his father started, but Casey cut in, voice rising with urgency. "No, I do. I've spent my whole life trying to fit into what you wanted. It's time for me to be seen for who I am, not what I think you'll accept." The surge of emotion caught even him off guard, but he stood firm, grounding himself in a newfound strength. The tension thickened, pushing against the air between them, and Casey prepared for the fallout. Would this confrontation illuminate their path forward, or would his father recoil into the shadows of disdain once more? Just as he thought he had communicated his resolve, his father's expression morphed into something unreadable, a mix of confusion and deep-seated anger. "You think you've grown up, Casey? That you can just erase the past with some drawings? You have no idea." The utterance sent a jolt of dread through Casey. Would today become yet another chapter of disconnection and rejection? But as his father's voice trailed off, Casey's resolve began to fray. Maybe he was still a boy in his father's eyes, forever struggling against the tide. Would he suffocate under the weight of those expectations or carve a new identity, one defined by authenticity rather than acceptance? As both men glared across the table, the electric potential of change loomed before them, ready to crack the surface of their fraught relationship. The urgency of the moment was palpable, resonating through Casey's bones. He realized that his journey was far from over, it was merely in its beginning stages, demanding further exploration. Would his confrontation yield the understanding he so desperately sought, or would he be left grappling with yet another unanswered question? The heart of the matter lay heavy between them, with choices and truths waiting to ignite. Casey's heart raced as he faced his father, uncertainty swirling within him. He had braved vulnerability and articulated his longing for recognition, but the rejection hung thick in the cafe air. Yet, this moment was pivotal. He would not retreat into silence again. "Listen," Casey began, steadying his voice against his rumbling emotions. "It's not just about the drawing. It's about the unspoken years, the pain we both carry, expectations, silence. How can we heal without confronting that?" His father's gaze wavered for just a beat, flickers of confusion and resentment battling for dominance in the depths of his eyes. "You think bringing a sketch will change everything? You don't understand how deep those roots run." A fire ignited in Casey. "Maybe you don't see how far I've come. I've spent years navigating equations, feeling lost, he said, gripping the table. But I've realized that what we cannot solve with numbers can be addressed with honesty. I need to know you're willing to understand our history, not just dismiss it because it doesn't align with your expectations. For a moment, silence prevailed. Casey saw weight lift, a shifting nuance in his father's demeanor. The old walls seemed to tremble, but they wouldn't collapse easily. You think you know everything, his father finally said, tones layered with fragility. I've always wanted the best for you. And what does that mean for me? Casey interjected. Did it ever matter who I am, or was I just a mold you tried to shape? The tension stretched, raw and painful. But in Casey's heart, hope pulsed steadily. He had fought for so long to escape the cycle of inherited doubt. You and we could choose to understand each other, he said quietly, his own vulnerability on display, now held firmly within his grasp. For the first time, his father winced, eyes narrowing in contemplation, reflecting the weight of the past for an agonizing moment. I didn't realize how much my expectations loomed over you, he admitted slowly. How it must have crushed your voice. Casey felt a rush of energy surge within him. This was the moment they both needed, an acknowledgement of the struggle that had defined them both. Exactly. I'm not finished growing. I'm learning, even from the scars. I want to build my own identity. But it has to be with your support and understanding. You think I can just shift my perspective on a whim? His father's blue gaze pierced through Casey, revealing layers of vulnerability he had never seen before. Let us work at it together, Casey pressed, but you have to meet me halfway. He reached for the sketch again, laying it more prominently between them. This illustrates our journey, the struggle, the potential for something greater. View it as a starting point, not an end point. As he spoke, he realized that while the conversation might not be resolved today, it was a catalyst, a showcasing of their intertwined legacy, not as victims of each other's expectations but as men seeking understanding and redemption. The silence that followed pressed against them, heavy but promising. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, both men held a glimmer of possibility. Casey's chest tightened, not with fear but with recognition. A man's potential was not merely defined by his past but by his resolve to reshape it. You're right. Maybe I've built these walls to protect myself without realizing they suffocated you. We both need to navigate this, Casey. A flicker of determination ignited in Casey as hope dawned upon him. As he looked into his father's eyes, he saw a reflection of the man he could be, one who faced obstacles rather than fleeing. Releasing a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, Casey felt the foundations around him shift, not quite stable yet, but promising. He wasn't just the boy chasing approval anymore, trapped in a cycle of shattered dreams. He was shaping his own narrative, ready to honor the struggle and transform it into growth. Hours later, as they parted ways, Casey walked away with a solid sense of purpose. He had accomplished much more than just expressing his feelings. He had stepped into his own life, opened a dialogue, and initiated a path toward mutual understanding with his father. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of expectation lift, replaced by the exhilarating responsibility of shaping his own destiny. He was no longer shackled by the ghosts of the past. He was a growing man navigating both ambition and emotion, equipped with the tools to redefine what success looked like on his terms. Today marked the beginning, he whispered to himself, stepping out into the world that had suddenly expanded with new possibilities. This was his moment of true achievement, to walk forward no longer alone, but alongside a man willing to understand him. It was time to forge ahead, leaving behind what held him back and embracing the relentless pursuit of his own identity. Now, if you've enjoyed witnessing Casey's transformation and the triumph of human connection, you need to subscribe now to the channel and be part of more powerful stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support the growth of these narratives. Comment below your thoughts on Casey's journey. What did you think of the resolution, and how do you relate to his struggles? And truly, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this kind of emotional growth and transformative storytelling. Don't wait even one more second. Show your support for the channel now.